Um, and if folks in the balcony okay, don't want to come down and consolidate down here, you're okay. All right, I guess you like those seats. There's a lot to explore here, and I think that both of these films are just exceptionally well done. And I hope that was sort of your impression as well. It's everything about them. It is certainly, the storylines are incredible. The editing is magnificent. The boldness of the filmmaking is evident. And finally, the music is really good as it's integrated here, not to be obtrusive, but that it integrates in a way which gives you like an alert, almost like an emotional alert sometimes. So I'm going to just jump right in, and I think there are probably, you have a mic to go in the audience. I think we're going to go to questions fairly soon, but Jennifer, if you could start with how the project came to you, and then sort of your engagement with it. You're in a maximum security prison, so there's always, I think, somewhat of an edge there, but you were in a sort of a sanctuary space with the Quilters. Talk a little bit about sort of your desire to engage in this project, what happened over the course of the project, et cetera, because people want to know. It's an unusual film.
Yeah, it is. Well, first of all, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for the Quilters in the group here, because I've learned
They're gorgeous.
How passionate and vital. Somebody said to me, quilters are the largest wonderful cult you never knew existed, which is true. They're amazing. They've been phenomenally supportive. No, it is, you hit upon the word sanctuary. I think the men in the sewing room, one of them says, you know, we grabbed a hold of this. We grabbed this opportunity. They see it as a sanctuary. They see it as a safe space. They've created this community within a larger kind of chaotic population. And so many things appeal to me about it. And mainly this idea that they, it was kind of a healing space. It felt incredibly collaborative, which is interesting. I kind of felt, obviously, with the two films, a sense of collaboration and a real palpable sense of love and care for each other, which was kind of amazing given the space. And the fact that I was given such access was tremendous. So yeah, it was a lot of things drew me to the story, mainly the humanity of it and the sense that this was a bridge for these men to connect to the outside and to their past, and kind of reframing who they are in their own minds, but also how they're viewed by us. So there were a lot of things that really spoke to me, and it gave me the opportunity to work with my phenomenal colleague and editor, who was the one who first told me about them and said, "This sounds like you," and I thought, damn, she's right.
Oh, that's great. Let's spend a minute with you, Toby, on the nature of the editing in the film. First of all, there are some really cool scenes where you see sort of quick cutting and things moving in order to capture sort of the pace of making what they do. And then there are very deliberate passages as well, which allow the film to breathe. So tell us about the challenges maybe in editing this. Were you there with Jen? No. So you just have the footage to work with. Tell us about the process of working together and some of the choices you made on editing this film.
First of all, hello, and thank you. And thank you to Simeon Hutner also, who personally invited us. And thank you for your film. That was beautiful. Well, Jen and I have worked on three and a half films previously. And one of the joys of working with Jen is we kind of share a language or a mind meld. Literally, we will finish each other's sentences. And, you know, while we're watching footage together, even if we're separate, in separate places, we'll talk about it later. It's like, oh my God, that moment when Jill said that, and it's totally on board. So it's that kind of a collaboration, which is great. I also just want to take a moment to recognize somebody else who contributed to the film, Sabine Hoffman.
Are you here, Sabine? Thank you. There you go.
Beautiful editor who came in when we were finishing and really needed some help in making hard choices to get it to time. I would say one of the things about this kind of a film in creating a short, which is not what I usually do, was really looking at the contrast between the perception of prisoners in a maximum security prison and the delicacy and care with which they do their work. So even visually, like when you were talking about the fast cutting, you know, seeing somebody outside with the barbed wire fence and then going to the delicate hands doing something, that was very deliberate. Also, my co-editor, Will Rogers, who isn't here unfortunately, he's also the person that created those graphic sequences. And he had a lot of fun with the fast cutting. I tend to move toward the more luxurious in terms of time, taking time with scenes and developing characters, which is hard to do in a short. But you know, if there was a division, he did more of the fast-paced moments, and I was doing the sort of longer, pensive moments within the film. I just wanted to also point out there was a phrase in your film that you said a couple of times, social solidarity, that just hit me. Obviously it has a different meaning, but within this population, among these men in the room, I felt like there was a bit of that happening, and that was a beautiful, you know, comparison.
Well, one observation quickly that I had is that the contrast between the rich color of the quilts and the drab nature of what the prisoners wear, just so striking, and I just sort of feel like the quilts infuse them with a life energy that is not beaten out, but is drained out of prisoners on a regular basis. So coming into this room, it's like, oh, this is a garden. This is...
Without a doubt. I mean, when I first walked in, it felt kind of like a beehive. You know, there's this movement where everyone is really busy individually, but also collaboratively. The walls are cinder block, really, and so they're the same color of their uniforms, basically. But then there's fabric from to floor to ceiling. And I do think that's a perfect way to put it. The quilts kind of infuse them with their energy, because each one is different, each one is specific, each one is personalized. And because it's, you know, this act of making something beautiful, but not just making something beautiful, but then giving it away. And that is just an amazing thing for any of us to experience, but in that context particularly. And this idea of teaching and giving and collaborating, which I hope was conveyed in the footage. That was so healing on a lot of levels.
Yes, yes. Jimmy has passed away. Can you give us a quick update on some of the others?
Yeah, in fact, one of the most moving screenings I've ever done in my entire life was 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago now, where I went out to Licking and I showed the men the film. And aside from making a very rookie mistake in a maximum security prison where I went to turn the lights off because of course you watch a movie in the dark, I was like quickly educated on that score. Where all the men were like, Jen, no. But it was absolutely astounding for me to, first of all, it's always the most nerve-wracking thing, and I'm sure that my fellow filmmakers here will agree, is to watch your work with the subject, because really your goal is to tell an authentic story, their authentic story, not yours. And so you want to feel like you've done them justice. And so to be in that room, and because we were supposed to do it in the visiting room and there was some kind of mix-up, so we ended up watching it in the sewing room, which I get chills thinking about it, because it ended up being the perfect place to watch it. And they were mesmerized and laughed at places I didn't expect, completely understood. You know, because I shot a lot of footage, many hours, and I explained to them why I felt it was stronger as a short, and they completely were in sync in terms of what the goal was, without me saying anything, which was kind of amazing. That and really saw the beauty in it, and were really excited. I should tell you, they sent those quilts that are in the lobby. Those were made by Jeremiah and one of the other men because they wanted quilts to travel with the film.
That's great.
So it was amazing. And so they're all still there, unfortunately. And Jimmy has passed away, but his daughter just saw the film and was incredibly moved. So yeah, if there's a sense of humanity that I think we need in this country, and we forget about lots of marginalized, and that is unfortunately, our incarceration issue is.
This is a deeply redemptive story, and I really appreciate you bringing it to us.
Thank you.
So all the quilts that are out, or you have brought from Licking.
Yes, there are 3 outside in the lobby if you'd like to see, and they were, it was their idea to do it, to make it and to send it, and the 3rd quilt they handed to me when I showed them the film 2 weeks ago. So it was a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Yeah. And as a short at 31 minutes, it's very fulfilling. It feels like a feature, and you made an interesting and a good choice, I think, in this case. Really, very, very fulfilling. Okay, gentlemen, thank you for coming from Great Britain to stage your world premiere here at Middleborough New Filmmakers Festival. And to Janet, our classmate, some of us here. Janet is a graduate of Wesleyan University, and there are many of us circulating, walking amongst you. I just want to sort of address these questions to the 3 of you, because I think, I feel like the 3 of you are quite integrated on this project. First, in terms of how you connected, can you talk about this, the filmmakers and Janet?
Sure. Can I just start as well by saying, Lloyd, thank you so much for having us here. We're really proud to be here. Thanks to the audience for coming. It's a real big deal for us screening this. It's taken 5 years to make this film, so this is the end of a very long, hard journey. So yeah, thanks.
Well, you're welcome, Danny, and we hope this is one of many festivals to follow.
Thank you. So the idea, about 10 years ago, I was kind of interested in what was happening in Rojava, as was a lot of people. In the news, it was when the battles with ISIS were kind of raging, and there was a lot of news in the UK, probably here too, about the female fighters fighting ISIS, but there wasn't much at the time going kind of into the behind the scenes, into kind of what was driving these kind of battles and the kind of ideology behind it. There's a society they were trying to build. And I thought I wanted to do something about it as a filmmaker. And I'd met Ross at a screening for another film about Rojava called The Accidental Anarchist, it was called. We decided to team up. We were thinking about different ways of approaching the story. I'd seen Janet talking at various events. In London, there's quite a big Kurdish community. So there was lots of different talks and lectures, events going on. You attended quite a lot of those, and I saw you speak numerous times. I think I approached you at one of them as well and got your email. And then sometime later, well, in 2018, it's when Turkey first invaded Afrin. And we'd been sitting on these ideas for a while, and we suddenly thought we had to kind of move quite quickly, because the whole kind of democratic experiment they were trying to build suddenly felt very much under threat. It was always fragile, but we thought we kind of had to move quite quickly. So we contacted Janet, and wasn't really thinking we'd get much of a response, or at least not for a few months. I think within 4 days, you got back to me saying, you're up for it.
Sign me up.
Yeah. And then like 4 or 5 months later, we were meeting Janet in Iraq and crossing into Syria.
So you had encountered her as she has been speaking about the project in Rojava.
Yeah.
Coincidental, or you actually you sought her out? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, we saw her speak at various events, and then eventually kind of contacted her. Yeah.
So, Janet, it's a bold film. Okay, I mean, it also encapsulates a lot of your life. And can you trace back maybe just a little bit about Murray, meeting him, becoming involved with Murray in a way that maybe reshaped your life, and then how this, going forward, you have brought that sensibility, that sort of passion to what we see here on the screen? It's a longish question, I understand, we're talking decades, but I'd like to get a little bit of the threads here, if you will.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. So I attended the Institute for Social Ecology in Plainfield, Vermont in 1987. I had been living in New York at the time, and a friend of a friend had recommended it. So I met Murray when I came up to that school. It was affiliated with Goddard at the time. And it was a 2-week program about ecology and democracy. And at the time, I was trying to decide whether to go to graduate school or what to do with my life. I took the GRE, did really well, but then when I heard Murray speak in 1987 in Plainfield, I thought, and he told me that he was going to be teaching a class in his living room, and I thought, I'd rather hear him than go to any graduate school. So I moved up to Vermont, basically, to work with him, and ended up spending 19 years collaborating with him. And it was just an incredibly rewarding experience. Psychologically, he focused me, he helped me develop my abilities, and then toward the end of his life, he died in 2006, I returned the favor by taking care of him in his last years. So that worked out very well. And then after I made a deathbed promise to him that I would write his biography, so I spent a good chunk of time after he died working on that. And meanwhile, we had been hearing about this Kurdish movement, the Kurdish movement's interest in his work. That dated from the Turkish, his works were translated to Turkish in the 1990s, and I remember signing, the day he signed the contract and put it in an envelope, and I went out and stuck it in a mailbox to send it back to whoever was the intermediary, and I thought to myself, nothing's ever going to come of this. You know, Turkey is not going to become a democratic ecological society in the near future anyway. And it turned out to be very consequential because it was that Turkish translation that came out of that contract that Abdullah Öcalan read when he was in solitary confinement on Imrali Island, and he decided that he was in solitary confinement, he had been asked the Conrads to recommend books of social theory to him. They sent him what I picture as a box, and Murray's translations were in there. And he decided that these kind of town meeting things like Bookchin was writing about in Vermont were really suitable for the Kurdish movement, because the Kurds, as you may know, are the largest ethnic group on the planet without a nation state of their own. They live as minorities in 4 countries in the Middle East. And the PKK's goal up until then had been to create an independent Kurdistan, but around 1999 or so, it seemed clear that this wasn't going to happen, and so for this stateless people, this idea of bottom-up democracy was really very appealing. And so Öcalan actually tried to get in touch with Murray, as we described, but Murray was really toward the end of his life and really too tired to engage in a dialogue. But Öcalan ended up taking these ideas of bottom-up democracy and transforming them into something he called democratic confederalism. And as I like to say, when the Kurdish people take theory very, very seriously, they don't do what some cultures do, which is to admire theory and put it in a book on a shelf and admire it. They don't just ignore it the way very practical-minded Americans do. They arrive at the right theory and they decide this is it, this is the way we're going to go. And so once the PKK adopted democratic confederalism in 2005, 2006, Kurds all over the Middle East began to implement it as much as they could. And in Turkey itself, that was very difficult because it's a very repressive society. But then in Syria, and also in Syria under Assad, this was a dictator. People were thrown in prison, tortured. But once the Arab Spring arrived in 2011 and the civil war began in 2012, the Kurds said, "A plague on both your houses, Mr. Assad, you dictator, and you jihadist religious nuts. We want to go our own way." And that's when they called it the third way in 2012. The democratic political institutions that they'd been creating underground under the Assad regime were able to blossom forth and proliferated, and people actually poured into the streets. They were so thrilled to participate in these neighborhood councils that actually they had to add a more base level of self-government called the commune at the street level, just to physically accommodate all the people who were interested in governing themselves in the wake of their terrible experiences under Assad. I'm sorry.
That was a totally brilliant encapsulation, Janet. Thank you. Let me go to Ross on this one. The danger level of making the film, any consternation, some of these scenes are harrowing. Talk about that, what your expectations were, we're going to do this, we're going to take a fearless approach.
Thanks so much for having us. I guess we all worked very closely together as a team. And what often happens in these productions is that the unsung heroes are the fixers. So the local people that we worked with on the ground, which was Osama and Hassan, and they really knew people and networks of people. And in some areas we had like an armed guard who would protect us. We were kind of there in a moment of like some kind of relative peace, but there were places that we went to, like in Raqqa, where there were still ISIS sleeper cells, but we kind of stuck together very closely as a team, and we just did it in a way that was quite a DIY project. I mean, we had a very low budget. We had it was 1 month of filming and then 5 years of post-production to get to this point. So I think the dangers were more in our mental state.
Sounds about right.
We needed to protect our mental state to get through the kind of long amount of time this took to happen. And I think you said something at the beginning that it was like, you know, your film was something tranquil going on amongst lots of chaos.
Yeah.
And in lots of ways, Rojava was like it's a tranquil place, but the Syrian civil war was so brutal and sectarian, and people suffered so much under the Assad regime and the ISIS jihadist militias and proxies that were similar to them. And Rojava was, in lots of ways, such a politics of hope. So, in many ways, the dangers, they were totally worth it to get this incredible story out.
And kind of self-selecting, you know, they're choosing that. And that was another similarity that I thought was interesting between the films.
Let's go to the audience. Who has questions for these fine filmmakers? Yeah, down here, quick.
Yeah. Hey, Janet, we were at Wesleyan together also. Rick Gilberg, Lloyd and I are old friends. So I was a union lawyer for 45 years, and because of that, I had an interest in groups, marginalized groups, building communities. And I spent some time in Central America in the 80s on, you know, investigating death squads and community organizations and labor and student organizations. And what happened to them was not as positive as what's happened in Rojava, because a lot of them were killed. But so as a result of that, I sort of followed Öcalan and the PKK and Rojava, but I have a two-part question. Other than, I don't know if you've ever watched that French espionage series Le Bureau, which was one of the great shows ever. There was a whole series about Kurdish women, a whole season about Kurdish women fighters, which was thrilling and exciting and just beautifully done and moving. But other than that, I have not seen any real serious coverage in the last few years. People are distracted by Gaza and Ukraine and so on. So, two-part question is, one is, what's going on there now? Because this is filmed several years ago, and is the community continuing to thrive under the constant threat? Second question is, did you ever get a sense of the Kurds feeling betrayed by the multiple times that the U.S. government enlisted them to help them and then walked away from them? So that's a two-part question.
We filmed in April of 2019, which was 1 month after the YPJ, by then folded into the SDF, had defeated Islamic State on Syrian territory. So it was just a month later. It was just in the wake of that victory. And just a few months after that, in October of 2019, maybe you remember that Donald Trump was president then, and gave knew that Erdogan wanted to invade Rojava, which he always wants to do because he's a dictator, right? And this is a democracy. Erdogan in Turkey has neo-Ottoman dreams that he wants to, restore the Ottoman Empire. And here's this country that just wants to live alone, just be able to live in peace. In any case, and also in Turkey, the Erdogan government is enforcing traditional roles for women, whereas in Rojava, as you've seen, there's a important principle of gender equality. So, for these and many more reasons, Erdogan is very, very hostile to Rojava, just to his south, and champing at the bit to invade. And once Donald Trump was president, Trump gave him a green light in a famous phone call, and sure enough, within a matter of hours, Erdogan invaded and just bit off a chunk of Rojava, a place called Serikaniye, and a couple of other places that continue to now be under Turkish administration, using jihadist proxies. So, and it's the threat of Turkey is constant. There's a kind of a low-level, slow-motion war going on where he will fly in drones over that place, Tel Nasri, where you saw the refugees from Afrin. That has been bombed by drones. I don't think there's any, I don't see how those refugees could continue to live there. And so, yeah, there's also airstrikes. Some of the people you saw in this film have had to flee, have run either to other parts of Rojava, or else have left. Like Hessen, our interpreter, now lives in France. He had to leave because he had collaborated with the Americans in the war against ISIS, and he knew that he would be subject to retaliation after that, the green light, after everyone's invasion. So he fled. He was able to get out and lives in France now. But it's important to say that this is the 10th anniversary has just passed. So the revolution does continue. They could, even as they have formed a very, very enlightened social order in the midst of a part of the country that has a lot of different geopolitical interests that are trying to undermine it. There's down in those Arab areas that were the SDF liberated from Islamic State. They are now under the Rojava administration. So. And even though the Assad regime for decades, propagandized to Arabs, now if the Kurds ever come into power, they're going to persecute you the way we persecute them, so be very afraid. Well, so the Kurds have always tried from the very beginning to bend over backwards to show, no, we want an inclusive, multi-ethnic democracy. We're not trying to impose Kurdish rule on everybody. We don't want payback. We want to form a multi-ethnic democracy because that is the only way that we will all survive. And that remains, to this day, an underpinning, a core belief of the society. It's been 5 years. I haven't been back since then, so I can't report in details about how democratic is the democracy still. I don't know, but I do know that the commitment to those aspirations in that remarkable experience is just that they have survived after fighting not one but two fascist threats, both from Turkey and from Islamic State, that they've fought those invaders off to as much as they possibly could, and of keeping it going even under this incredibly stressful situation. And by the way, they have long looked for diplomatic recognition of the self-administration of Rojava. They're not trying to break away from Syria. They want to just control their own areas in northeastern Syria. And they've, even though they turned out to be our best allies, the US-led coalition's best allies in the war against Islamic State, the US aid that is provided to them only goes for the military. It doesn't go for the new society. So they have the US has not given Rojava diplomatic recognition, and so that means that, and they don't get the kind of aid that they really need to survive. The medical conditions there, I understand, are very dire because they just don't have any hospital supplies. So the U.S. is still there, even after the U.S. pulled out troops after that October 2019 phone call. They're still there. There's still skirmishes in Deir ez-Zor with Islamic State and with other Iranian-backed militias in that area, and it's kind of just continuing in the low level and slow motion. If the U.S. were ever to pull out, then Turkey would go in. I'm sorry.
It's okay. We have time for one more question. Who's doing that? We're here. Yep. Can we get that?
Hi, Jen. I wanted to ask, I noted that you didn't put down the crimes for these fellows, and what was your reasoning behind that?
Oh, the sentence, you mean?
Yeah.
Their sentence?
Well, the sentence we got, but not the crime.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was actually very intentional. The question was, their sentence was listed on their lower third, but not the crime. Well, that was very intentional from the pretty beginning, although we debated back and forth. I felt like we've seen a lot of films about crime and how people get there and what brought them to prison. I felt like this was a very different film. I really wanted it to be how they were using that time and all those layers that we don't think about once they're there for such a long time. But I also thought there would be some curiosity about how long they were there. And more than half the sewers in there are doing life. So that is always an interesting piece. I've done another film in a prison, in a women's prison, and this idea of finding purpose, joy is hard to believe, but some sense of purpose and joy, even if you know that you're not going to be outside again. And so I thought it was important for people to understand that many of them were lifers and that some of the other ones are there for less time. So thank you for asking that.
Before we wrap up, just a quick announcement. So Toby is going to appear at 4 o'clock on an editor's panel today at the town office building from 4 to 5. Sabine will be on that panel as well, and Simeon Hutner, who is sitting next. And David Teague is here too. This comprises 3 of the 4 editors on the panel, and will be moderated by Simeon. This may be worthwhile if you are interested in understanding the role that editors play, essentially in shaping a film. It is no insubstantial thing. So they'll be at the town office building, which is right on the rotary. If you've not been in Middlebury, it's a traffic rotary, and it is the modern-looking building. You can't miss it. Go in the entrance. And they're using the conference room on the left side of the building. Could we give a round of applause to all these folks here before we break up? Yeah, Jen would like to say one more thing, please. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say one more thing. The men are very interested in using this film for outreach, as I am. All my films I've used in some outreach capacity. So I'm planning to get this film inside other prisons. So there'll be an outreach component if people want to donate. So just follow our social media. If you're on social media, if you look for the Quilters doc, we'll be updating people on that. So I just wanted to let people know that.
Thank you all. Again, thank you so much for coming.